I'm Sara Sutherland. I own Sara Sutherland Fitness. I've been in the health and wellness space now for about 10 years. Started off as an own personal transformation, as I was personally starting to feel lethargic and not having the energy that I wanted, and just wondered if in my late 20s it was like the beginning of the end for me. So that's kind of how I started. I do believe, though, we all have an opportunity that we do not have to end up in a walker someday. I do believe that we can keep our strength. I do believe that we can age gracefully. I believe it is an opportunity that you can feel your current age 20 years from now, or even today, feel 20 years younger. My very good friend, Kevin, who had this exact experience that introduced me to Brian, he rolled back the clock and he feels 20 years younger today than he did before. So with that, it kind of brought me to have an opportunity to meet Brian. Decided to team up to share with you how his knowledge in controlling the aging process and how we have the chance to lengthen our lives, our quality of life, and all the, actually more specifically, the science behind it. So with that quick introduction, let's get to it. So Brian Theiss owns Theiss Care, and you all would have received, hopefully, the link to his kind of introduction, his website beforehand, if you wanted a chance to learn a little bit more about him. But just briefly, Brian, first of all, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Really, it's a pleasure.
Yes. So thank you. So how long have you specifically been focused on kind of the health and wellness space?
For about 40 years. About 40 years now. Yep.
Just a few.
Yep, just a few years.
Just a few. So how was it that you got started?
Well, as a child, I was very sick. And so with my grandparents and their lines of work, I was introduced to the medical community and the science community. So when I started looking for a real solution to my health, I went to the medical part of the business. And so they taught me on a biological level what all this meant and how to start to take real control by understanding real knowledge. So that's how I got started. And then I went into school to become a sports medicine doctor. And at 20 years of age, I was paralyzed. So I became my own test subject. And that's what I did. So combinations of educating myself and touching other people. That's how this whole process started. And I'm happy to report that I've had over 25,000 successful documented cases globally. And these are independent science and medical doctors supporting our findings and our results.
That's amazing. You've been very busy.
I still am. We still work 15 hours a day and we love it. Praise God, right?
Yep. There we go. I don't know that any entrepreneur would have it any other way.
Sure.
So, all right. So then taking all of that knowledge, all that experience, all of the clients that you've had an opportunity to work with, what then are some of your accomplishments that you've been able to achieve so far in your career?
Well, that's a good answer, a good question. To find out more, I would have to do what I would recommend everyone else to do. Go to my website and I don't mean to be braggadocious. I've just lost count. I think some of my most significant one was being awarded the #1 health and wellness consultant in the world. I beat 250,000 competing professionals in 93 countries. So I've done those things, and I've pioneered processes like oxidative states and transitioning from glycolic into oxidative and all these little wonderful things that are kind of nerdy, but important because the end results, it changes people's lives.
100%. It takes it to a whole new level where, everyone hears so much about working out and nutrition, but there's so many other factors that go into the aging process. So
Right.
How we feel in general. So, all right. So then that kind of leads us over into the topic for tonight, which is something that people have been trying to get the answer to really probably for centuries, right? How do we not only turn back the clock, but turn back the clock in an organic way that we have control over it and it's healthy and arguably maybe the right way?
Right. That's another great question. But the way to start doing that is you have to truly understand what aging is and the biological processes. And until we know that, we'll be a statistic and lose 98% of all our biological benefit for the work that we put into place. Remember, we're going to look at this as big picture, but this is a very complicated process. To give you an idea, we have 100 trillion cells, and each cell goes through 20,000 chemical reactions per second per cell, and they all require oxygen, and oxygen is the key to aging. It is super, super critical. So if we have the time today, we'll do a little experiment for everybody out there, and they'll start to feel their cells to disintegrate after about 6 to 10 seconds by just simply holding their breath. So by understanding these factors and how it works is when we start to be able to do something. To give you an idea, aging is really the breakdown and the buildup and repair of cells. How we regulate those two are going to determine the length of our lives and the quality of our lives and experiences within there. But that's controlled by lifestyle from the time of conception. So I just turned 57, even though I look 21, right, guys? So I just turned 57. But in my age, when I grew up, we were really around being active all the time. The only time we ate is when we had to eat. You know, there wasn't a whole lot of these things in life. Everything we had to do, we had to work for them. We were processing oxygen on a huge basis. So what that meant from the time of our conception to about the age of 20 on the calendar, take a month or a year in any direction, we were doing one thing. We weren't aging, guys. We were growing. Aging doesn't start to take place until we get to the chronological age of 20. Take a week or a month or a year in any direction. Once we get to that part of our lives, we get into the most important part of our lives called biological aging. And that is controlled by lifestyle, and how we process and utilize oxygen is everything. So in science, we call 20 to 30 years of age the Goldilocks period of time. Now, I don't know how many remember Goldilocks, but the porridge was just right? So between 20 to 30, we're relatively healthy up to that point. The porridge is just right. Everything will work. If we look at marketing today in this industry or this space, 95% of all marketing is geared between 20 to 30-year-olds for a reason, right? After 30, for all you guys out there, they don't want to touch you. It's too complicated. Because we have to get in this factor called an oxidative capacity. So there's these little bitty cells, they're called mitochondria, and they produce ATP, and they're significant. How we keep those things saturated and how we keep them going in these different muscle fiber types determines our biological aging. Every form of disease is caused from dysfunction of these little bitty cells called mitochondria. So again, by understanding these things is how we start to be able to put a real process or program into place to do something significant.
So then how do we get people kind of in that oxidative state so they have the opportunity to turn back the clock? I mean, I know a lot of the folks that are on here right now, when we're around 30 and plus, right? So, you know, even if the marketing, the general marketing in the health and wellness space isn't targeting us anymore, it is still possible to take control of ourselves and lifestyle. So talk a little bit about how people get in that oxidative state.
First of all, you have to be able to be identified where you are biologically today. And that's why your physical checkups are critical. You need to know where you're at. You have to know if there's any premature aging, illness, or disease in your body, at what your respiratory rates, you know, what your VO2 max, well, maybe not VO2 max testing, but your oxygen saturations, what your glucose levels are, what your heart rate, because all these are snapshots of where you are biologically. So by understanding that, and if you do have organ failure or organ pre-disease, and you are on some form of medication, you need to understand how to control that and what are the side effects of that. Because remember, every single thing counts. The body is the best scorekeeper, and it's relentless. It does not let you get away with anything. So by identifying those factors, then we can look at a thing called volume and intensity. So volume in an exercise program is just the amount of repetitions you're doing. The intensity is the amount of weight that you're pushing, and it can even be your body weight. So what you want to do is you want to start to get into a form. When we start to get into oxidative states, we want your reps to be higher in which is your volume, right? And we want your intensities to be lower, because that's going to activate the mitochondria and these things called slow twitching muscle fibers, which are significant. If we can't get those cells to start increasing their density and producing more mitochondria, we're going to be a statistic, and with 2 months, 98% of all our effort will be worthless, other than we get to move, right? And like we stated in when we started this conversation, if you're relatively healthy up to 20 and you're still exercising between 20 to 30, about everything will work. But after 30, man, that whole thing changes. In fact, when we get to 50, if we get to 50 chronological, which are calendar years, we could literally have the opportunity to be biologically in our 20s or biologically in our 80s and 90s. That's why time we get to 60 to 65, it looks like chicken noodle soup. There's no way to score hardly anything, because it's so extreme on every level. So the oxidative state, by picking exercise that's going to bring your respiratory rate up, but you got to control it and you got to buffer it. Again, this is a real big picture. It gets very, very specific on the individual organism or the individual client that we're dealing with. So it has to be in those oxidative states, and your nutrition has to support it. And let me tell you why. Most people are taught that nutrition is just calories and energies. It's much more than that. It's information that's directing the cells, the messenger RNA, and these things called ribosomes. And that is critical. So by doing that, it's giving specific information to that cell to work perfectly or not. And remember, we have 100 trillion cells. Each cell is going through 20,000 chemical reactions per second per cell. And I don't even know what that number is. I can barely count past 10.
Right.
Try to comprehend.
There's a lot of zeros.
Right. And that's why you've done such a wonderful thing here. You're joining us up together to start educating people to put real life plans and biological reversing aging plans together. So that's how we would start that process, by understanding it, working on your volume, working on your intensities. Some of those people can do 2 to 3 different exercises at one time. Some people can do 8, some people can do up to 24. It depends on where your status is biologically. So again, when you take this information, when you gather it from your healthcare providers, you have to look at it different, guys, because it's giving you a snapshot of what's taking place. And that snapshot is giving you an indication on how you're controlling your biological aging. Because after 20, chronological aging is irrelevant. It's all biological based.
Lifestyle does play a huge factor into it. There is no doubt. And, that's where one thing, that I see a lot is the internet is a blessing and a curse. People are goodwill intentions with getting information out there, grabbing a workout here or there, asking and yeah, there's some generalities that can apply to everyone, but, depending on where you're at in your body with your hormones and all kinds of different things. I mean, it is not a copy paste situation with really anybody. Workouts, nutrition. I mean, everyone's lives are different. Everyone's history is different of how you got here. There's genetics, there's previous lifestyle, and it is definitely a much broader, it's different for everyone, for sure. There is definitely no doubt about that.
You hit on a very important thing. They try to convince us that it's generic. It's not generic at all. One size does not fit all here. Even if we look at identical twins biologically and all those chemical reactions, they're night and day different. They're metabolizing completely different than their identical twin. And what's important, it's not what I know, Sarah, it's not what you know, it's the information that we can give to them so they live in their knowing And that's what's powerful there. Giving them the information that they know themselves, so they can biologically feel and understand and support it through science, so they know where they're going. And I
Absolutely.
spent decades doing that.
Yep. And it does, it makes a difference, truly understanding, what that internal profile looks like for you. Even our medical community is super fabulous in helping, address maybe current problems. But, when was the last time you had somebody just go in for their annual wellness check, which I know a lot of adults that don't go to the doctor for an annual wellness check anymore, right? They only go when they're sick is when they show up. But even if there was somebody that consistently went for checkups, have you ever seen somebody already know all of this information about themselves? Or is this something where it's not normally done automatically, right?
Correct. So I made it a practice for 4 decades for everybody to be evaluated and assessed before I even talk to them. Because I'm not talking to them as a person. I need to understand where they are biologically, chemically, and what they can process and not process. So when we work with them, it's an assessment to understand the variables that are controlling them, so we can give them a life-changing program. And these are life-changing programs.
So now we kind of briefly touched on it though, but going back to kind of the aging process and what you know about getting in the oxidative state and how someone can really take where they're at now, implement some lifestyle changes, and feel like they're rolling back the clock 20 years. How specifically in like my world where it's mostly been fitness and nutrition, how does somebody, how do workouts and nutrition kind of play factor in for this goal?
Let's focus on the nutrition, a simple test that every one of these people can do. We have to identify what cravings are. They're either psychological or they're biochemical. So remember, every time we consume anything, it's information to our cells. Those cells are going to trigger organs to do specific things. So give you an idea. I'll ask you this. What do we have in common with goldfish and pigs?
I don't know. What do we have in common with goldfish and pigs?
We don't have any chemical receptor loops in our bloodstreams for simple sugars. So what this means is this: if we all decided we were all going to go, all of us on this meeting tonight, we all decided we we're going to go buy a goldfish in the morning, buy a bowl and put it in there and get one whole can of food and dump it in, then we go about our days and we come back at night, what would happen to every one of those goldfish?
Guessing they probably would be floating to the top.
They'd be floating to the top because they have no sensations of food. And pigs are the same way. That's why they feed them slop and they have competitions. How big can we get them? If you keep feeding them, they'll keep eating. What we have in common is we don't have those chemical receptor loops for simple carbohydrates in our diets. Why do you think they put it in our diets? Once we take those in, it releases a hormone for our stomachs called ghrelin. Ghrelin increases appetite and it drives satiety away. When we eat foods that are given proper information to our cells to drive them, it releases another hormone from our intestines called leptin that gives us satiety. You want to be in stasis all the time. And a simple thing that every one of you can do is identify what you're doing, get to that point and understand the feelings, the chemical reactions that are taking place. Your body is a genius. It will tell you. Feel those sensations. And remember, we are only designed to take 10% in from the environment and produce 90% for our bodies. And we in the West, in the United States, do completely different. And that's why we're accelerated premature aging, illness, and disease and death pattern. We have more available to us now than we've ever had in the history of known world. And we die of accelerated premature and death illness faster than any other time in recorded history that we're aware of. Isn't that crazy? So again, to go back to your food, a simple thing that everyone can do, identify these foods. Take in some simple carbohydrates and feel the effects. Take in things that have vitamins and minerals and trace elements, are protein heavy, and you're going to feel the different chemical sensations. You want to build this steady all day long. If you're up and down, you're on a roller coaster ride, and you're going to beat your pancreas to shut it off.
Yeah, I mean, the American diet is full of simple carbohydrates. I mean, everywhere you look, it's
The American diet is no longer for us. It's made for profit.
100%. And it's the
So
quick
that's
easy
why.
thing. Yep. And go ahead.
Until people wake up and start to understand really what's happening with real factual information, their lives won't change, right? They won't change.
A one simple rule that helped me when I first started my journey that tends to be really super helpful is, you mentioned it briefly, but prioritizing protein to keep that blood sugar level regulated and that feeling fuller for longer. I mean, that is the one thing that if you do really start paying attention to what you're consuming, whether it's out and about or what you're making at home, I mean, we underserve ourselves protein pretty consistently across the board.
Yeah. And keep in mind, everybody, if you have a cravings for food, you're bringing in the wrong information. The right information never produces craving chemically ever. It's the opposite effect. You say, oh gosh, I guess I got to eat again, right? And when you're in the right state, you won't consume much because your body's delivering the other 90% for you. Those are simple things that everybody tuning in can start to learn how to do today.
Mm-hmm.
Then what you do is you go into your oxidative state. You pick 4 to 6 to 8, depending where you're at. Simple exercise that's going to with high volumes, right? And that can be subjective. If you're deconditioned or have issues, 8 repetitions can be high volume, right? Mm-hmm. If you're super athletic, 50 repetitions could be pretty normal. So again, you find out what's good for you. Pick these exercises, higher volumes of repetitions, lower in weight, because the weight means nothing. For biological aging, the weight is irrelevant. It's only utilized as a method and the tools to get the body to process oxygen. Please, everybody understand that. All this equipment I have in this facility, I call it farming equipment. It's just made to move us because we're no longer farming. So we pick those exercises with higher repetitions, put some light cardio in between, because now we got to buffer the chemical reactions taking place, or they'll get a bottleneck and the muscles will stop working. Couple that with your diet, be on a consistent process, and watch what starts to happen. But I got to go back. You have to be clear on where you're at and get guidelines and stipulations from you, Sara, that you're requiring from your medical professionals for these folks that you're dealing with, because you have the keys to the kingdom. They just need to go to you to get it, or join with us or something of that nature, right?
Yep.
The powerful thing that you're bringing here. You're bringing real information with real life-changing choices for everyone who's watching here.
And the ability to know that you have complete control over how you're feeling, what you want for the direction of your life, it's all controlled by you. But knowledge starts the change process.
It's all in the knowledge. And remember, 95% of the length and quality of our life and the health within this, we control. Mm-hmm. 95. That is huge. But the world tries to convince us it's only about 10.
Well, and then for somebody like me, who I love to control every situation of the day as much as I possibly can, and I know there's a few people on the phone, I see your names and I know who you are, that equally love to be in control of your day. This is a super fabulous outlet of something for me when I first got into it, just how much more powerful I felt knowing that I was in control, never feeling like I couldn't ever be exactly where I wanted to be with just how I felt, day in and day out. And it's not, you have your ups and downs, right? That's just life in general. And you have different phases of life, but going back to always knowing that I know exactly what I need to do to get to where I need to go was a great outlet for my love for control. So, knowing that for yourselves is an amazing thing. So instead of just following a plan that somebody wrote for you, anyone can follow a plan for a couple of months, run through the motions, but really taking the time to learn what it is for you is life-changing for sure.
And there's so much power in your statement. And I'm going to tell you why. If you do not learn how to control your health and the variables that mandate it, somebody else is. And let me tell you, your disease and your illness is very profitable for them. So if you don't take the time to learn this for yourself, you're going to be subject to their whims and their ways and what they want to do. And the costs associated with that. And let me tell you, the costs are massive.
A lot.
Both sides, not only the financial costs, but the cost of your life is huge. Believe me, I've been there too many times.
I have a lot of little people that rely on me. I don't have a whole lot of time to be sick or down or, just incapable. So, now in this stage of life, that's definitely what fuels me, is to make sure that I am available for them as much as myself as well, too, plays into it. So, well, you did kind of then answer my final question I have for you, is how kind of workouts and nutrition, play into, the whole picture of how we can kind of control and work towards the goal. So, what would you say then? We're getting up here again, 7:30. So in respect for everyone's time, what would you say is like the next best step? I'm going to drop, which by the way, too, for all of you joining tonight, I'm going to leave in the comments. So don't close out Zoom without grabbing this link from inside the comments to where, Brian's team is actually giving away 2 complimentary sessions to one lucky attendee. And it's just going to require a quick fill out of a pre-qualification kind of form that he has to get a chance to kind of make sure that, if you are the one that wins, that it will be the healthy and right thing for you. So don't close out of the Zoom link until you grab that. Because you're going to want to fill that out for the chance to win those 2 sessions, which I'm kind of jealous of. I'll probably join in on the calls just so I can learn by association through you all. So that's number 1. So number 2 is beyond that, Brian, what would be the next best step if somebody wants to continue learning more about this topic, or anything else beyond this kind of conversation?
Well, before I answer that, which I will, I want to let everybody know who's watching us. And you need to be grateful and you need to be thankful for what Sara is bringing to you guys. Because I know what her true mission is, and her mission is to make a permanent change in the quality and length of everybody's life that will listen. And that is hugely powerful. As we know, Sara has these little jewels that she's fully responsible for. So now her life is worked completely different. She can't afford to go down. So this is what I would summarize. For those who are going to qualify this and who pick this 2-session response, for that person who gets that, I'm going to encourage you, we'll be in contact, but I encourage you to provide as much of your health history to me as possible. Because of what I'm going to provide for you in those 2 hours is going to be difficult to find anywhere else in the world today. So that's hugely, hugely important. So I want to stress that. So ask me that brilliant question one more time, because I want to make sure I'm crystal clear on it.
What would you say is the next best step? That question?
Yep.
Okay. that question. So what would you say is the next best step that you would suggest for all of the amazing folks that we have that joined us on the call live tonight?
For every one of them to contact us personally, and we'll give you 10 to 15 minutes to answer any of these questions in private, which we will share as long as we're capable of sharing that. Because my mission is in line with Sarah's, and we will do that for you. You'll contact us directly or contact us through Sarah, and we'll give you 10 to 15 minutes to answer some of the questions that you guys have that you might not want to express in a public forum, and we'll answer those things in private.
I have a link for that as well, actually, that I will add to the chat here as well. So the first one is the pre-qualification form if you want to be entered in to win the complimentary 2 1-hour-long sessions with Brian and his team. And the second link is for the, what do you call it? Just a phone call evaluation, or just a follow-up.
Yeah, and we're going to do that for you, Sarah, because you care about these people. We're going to take it to the next step, and we're just going to have a private conversation with them.
Awesome. So I thank you. That's amazing, because that wasn't something we talked about you doing. So I appreciate you even investing that extra time in this group, because they are all very near and dear to my heart. I'm super thankful that they took the time out of their night and trusted in me to bring, some of this information to them. So that is also amazing. So I do have a link form for that then too, that I just dropped in, that is going to be just a really quick contact form, basically, that you can complete if you want to schedule that time to answer questions with Brian directly that came up after the call for today. I dropped that in the link in the comments. Grab that one, and that one's just a quick contact form for them to know how to reach out to you to schedule the time to chat. So
yeah. And remember, everybody, knowledge is the currency of the universe. Once you can identify the variables that are controlling you through true knowledge, I promise you, that is a gift that will keep giving to you and everyone that you love and care about in your life, because you will have the power to make the decisions for yourself that trickle into everything in your life.
I can 100% attest to that, because, I was somebody where I didn't really pay attention to what I was doing. I'd always been active, ate whatever I wanted, kind of, I feel like a common story of anyone getting through maybe even college, right? And then I started working. I had a career. I was working, 16-hour-long days. I was eating on the road. I was traveling. I was living out of a suitcase, constantly on the go. And I remember I had this one moment where I was sitting in an airport and I watched my life flash before my eyes, like 30 years in advance. And I was like, these people are business people. They've been traveling. They're in their suits and they can't make it from like one gate over to the next one without like the sweating. And you could just tell they were not wanting to give in and buy the next size suit, because those are not forgiving, right, at all. And I would try things or think I would try things, or I'd grab. And I mean, the first thing once I hired a coach, did it myself, and then continued to learn for myself and through helping other people, it is a game changer. Like having that confidence and just knowing exactly what you need to do. It's a confidence builder, both inside and outside, because if you take care of yourself internally, it shows up on the outside too, which brings a whole new level of confidence as well.
So listen to this little factoid. You talk about sweating. Do you know the only reason we sweat?
Why?
For spinal cord. Have you noticed when you sweat, you start to sweat down your back, because it's got to cool off the central nervous system for the cells to function.
Interesting.
Most people don't know that.
I did not know that.
That's why we sweat, and we sweat through these pores all day, and through different sites, because we have to keep that spinal cord at a specific temperature. That's why we sweat.
Love that. There we go. Now we're getting the whole physiological thing going on too, in addition to the aging process. So wonderful. Well, we went long, but I appreciate your time. And for everyone on, I appreciate your time and hanging in there with us. We ran a little bit late, but hopefully this was a lot of really great information for you. Please do feel free to book the time with Brian directly for follow-ups. Absolutely. I have an open door policy. You can email me the questions and I can get answers for you as well. But I do really also, Brian, appreciate your time. Kevin, thank you for introducing the two of us. Your story is just one of the best that I've heard in a really long time of how this can all truly, how you can roll back the clock for people. So I love that you shared that with me and connected us. So thank you, Brian, for your time this evening. Thank you everyone for joining. And until next time, copy the links before we close it down. And if you miss them, you can email me back. So.
And Sarah, thank you so much for the opportunity to touch more people's lives.
Yes, thank you. I know that's what it's all about. I feel like when you're in this space, it ends up being that's the most rewarding part for sure. So awesome. Well, thank you everyone. Have a really super great night.
Thanks for your time. Okay. Bye-bye, guys.